Committee. I'm Councillor Eddie Lavery, the Committee Chairman. Well, welcome to our audience and also those who are watching us on the Council's YouTube channel. The business of tonight is as published in the agenda. We're taking all the items, they're all in part one, and there are no changes to that agenda. I would remind everybody that when you speak, please make sure your microphones are on and you're speaking into them, because that is what will be picked up by the YouTube feed. For those in the audience, you won't be visible on the television unless you get yourselves to one of these lovely tables when you will figure in it. If the fire alarm goes, we will assume it's for real because there are no planned fire drills. The fire exits are in that corner where you come in and in the corner behind me. Could I please ask that all mobile phones are switched off or at least to silent, and in particular those who are sitting around me, because those are the ones that normally let us down. Can I do apologies for absence first, please?
None, Chairman.
Any declarations of interest? Can I have approval for the minutes of the meeting 12th of May that are in the bundle? Thank you. There are no matters notified in advance as urgent. All matters are in part one. We have petitions on 3 items tonight, items 6, 7, it says 10. No, 6, 7 and 8. I was going to say I had a 10 there, which rather confused me. 6, 7 and 8. On items where there are petitions, petitioners get 5 minutes to address us, 4 minutes on a green light, 1 minute on an amber light, and when you get to red I will stop you. On any item where there is a petition, regardless of whether the petitioner chooses to address us or not, applicants or their agents have a right to address us, as do ward councillors on any item before us. I see Councillor Seaman Digby in the audience, and I'm presuming that's in relation to 10 Jackets Lane. The voting members of committee tonight, I'll start down on my far right, Councillor Jem Duduku, Councillor Duncan Flynn, Councillor Ray Graham, Councillor Henry Higgins, Councillor John Morgan. On my left, Councillor John Morse, Councillor Manjit Katra and Councillor John Oswell. Richard Conroy is our presenting officer tonight. James Roger, the head of planning, will offer us advice. Charles Francis is our clerk. Nicole Cameron is our legal advisor. And Jyoti Mehta is also a legal advisor, but she's just sitting here to take notes and understand what we do. Her turn is yet to come. Okay, with the preliminaries done, I move straight in, please, to item 6, which is 53 Pinway, Ruislip. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks permission for the erection of a 2-storey rear extension, part single-storey rear extension, and 2 single-storey side extensions following demolition of the existing structures along the side. A petition objecting to the proposal with 25 signatures has been received. The application property is located on the eastern side of Pinway, which is shown on the plan above. The site has a blanket TPO protecting trees and is within an archaeological priority area. The opposite side of the road is within the Moat Drive area of special character, which is hatched as purple on the plan. You can also see on this image that the properties along the street have a staggered front building line, which I think is important to note. So the existing site has a 2-storey detached property currently sitting on it. The proposal is shown on the next plan. First, I think it's worth pointing out that the single-storey side extensions, none of the extensions project beyond the main front building or line of the existing property. The side extensions are the parts that are most visible from the street. They measure 1.9 metres in width, a maximum height of 3.4 metres, and they're both set back from their respective boundaries by 1 metre on either side. In 2015, consent was given for single-storey rear single-storey rear and side extensions, which are similar to the single-storey rear and side elements hereby sought. Therefore, I think it's important to focus on the first floor rear section, which is the larger element, which I'm pointing to on this image here. I'd also like to mention that a two-storey rear extension has been previously refused in 2010 by virtue of its disproportionate size, which was considered to fail to be subordinate to the original property and due in part to its design, which had a large crown roof. The first floor rear extension shown on this plan has now been broken up into two distinct parts with pitched roof features in each segment. This is considered to make it more subordinate to the original property and also is considered to overcome the previous concerns regarding the crown roof. The first floor element projects 4 meters from the main rear wall here and would span the full width of the rear section of the property. Given its position on the back of the property, it's not considered to have a significant impact on the visual amenity of the street scene. And given its new design, it's considered to overcome the previous reasons for refusal in terms of design. I think on balance, the officer has set out in the report his justifications for why he thinks it now is acceptable in design terms, given the setback from the boundaries and its discrete location on the back of the property. So it's no longer considered to have a detrimental impact on the street scene and is acceptable in design terms. In terms of impact in number 55, this photo on the right shows the positioning of the neighbour just here or here. So this property is set further back than the application property, which means that there will be less impact. There's no windows on its side. Also, the first floor rear extension is set 2.9 meters back from the boundary as mentioned. So I think overall there isn't considered to be any harm on this neighbour. On the other side, number 51, shown on this photograph here, is forward of the application property. I would like to draw your attention to this window, which is a primary window that serves a bedroom. There's also a secondary window just tucked in behind the projecting bay, which is likely to be affected by the development, but because the primary window here would retain sufficient outlook and daylight, the impact is not considered to be significant enough to justify a refusal on those grounds. This photograph here on the left shows the existing structures along the side of the property between number 51 and the application property. On the right we have the rear of number 51. These windows on the rear gable and the openings on the rear ground level would both sit outside the 45-degree line in relation to the proposed development at first floor level. So overall, there is not considered to be sufficient harm to the amenity of those residents. I think overall and on balance, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in design terms. It would not adversely affect neighbours or the street scene. Therefore, it has been recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Addendum.
Thank you, Chair. We've also added a condition to restrict permitted development rights on the property, which is set out in the addendum sheet.
There's a petition on this one. Anyone here on behalf of petitioners? Not seeing any hands raised. I'm assuming not. Anyone here on behalf of the agent or the applicant for this one? No hands raised again. In which case, I move to debate.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm still concerned about bulk on this property. If you look at the pictures of the other properties, it will be substantially different in its appearance. And this crown effect is just swamping up the whole of the site. I know they've removed it and tried to think, but the loss of light of that one window and that neighbour is a concern for me.
We'll do that in a moment because I think there is a... Councillor Oswald.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, it is bulky, but it's within policy. So I don't know. I think I'm minded to approve the officer's recommendation and move them.
Okay, let me just see what others are coming at me with. Councillor Morgan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can the officers tell us the difference between this proposal that has been offered for acceptance and the one that we refused, that was also a double-storey extension?
Richard? Yeah. I'll let you start off. James will come in.
Yeah. So the main difference is that it doesn't extend as deep just here. And also the roof has been changed from a crown roof to a double pitch, which makes it obviously more subordinate and in keeping.
First, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up Councillor Morgan's query, you just said it doesn't extend as deep. Can you give us any idea on measurements?
Any question?
Yeah, if you look at the second paragraph of page 8, so it's the second paragraph down page 8, where it refers to the 4 metre depth of this extension compared with 6 metres
2 metres off
previously.
Okay, right, that answers that one. Councillor Morse.
Mr. Chair, I tend to agree. I have some degree of concern with the bulk of this development. What we seem to be saying is the first height level is okay because it's been approved by an inspector, but he hasn't looked at the two in combination. And I think that is what I would draw to his attention is the difference.
Can I make a suggestion on this one? Also, the plans we have before us aren't particularly fulsome, if I can be honest, in terms of existing and proposed. There's just about enough there. This might be worth a look. Might be worth a site visit, this one, because I think it is. The officer, I think, used the word on balance about 4 times in his presentation, which generally means we're close to the line, although officers believe we're over it. Could somebody... Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree that the plans are very limited, and with some guidance, I suggest we do go for a site visit on this.
I'll just quickly comment. We did ask the architect if we could have some 45-degree lines and more information. The architect didn't want to provide extra information because they are entitled, should they wish to say that they don't want to provide us extra information. But there is a very unusual property, the main, because obviously there's one neighbour that isn't affected and the other neighbour that is affected to a degree, and that's a very unusual property. So there would seem to be some sense.
We'll go and have a look at it on the site and see what we make of it, I think. I have a proposer for that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Graham. All those in favour of deferring for a site visit, please show for me. Thank you. That one's deferred. Right, I now move to item 7, 57 Copswood Way, Northwood. I think they are. Yeah. The petitioner is here for this one, aren't they? Yes, that's what I thought.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for the erection of a replacement 2-storey detached dwelling following demolition of the existing house. A petition with 56 signatures objecting to the proposal has been received from residents. I'd also just like to highlight in the addendum sheet, we vary condition 11 so as to obscure glaze all flank windows to prevent overlooking of neighbouring properties. The site is located on the eastern side of Copswood Way and is within the Copswood Estate Area of Special Local Character, shown again on purple on the plan above. The site also has a blanket tree preservation order. Before I move on from the location plan, I think it's worth noting that these properties do benefit from spacious plot sizes. Revised plans have been received to show that the southern end of the front elevation of the proposed dwelling has been set back. I'm afraid it's not very clear on this image, but approximately here, it's been set back so that it's in line with the neighbouring property. It also will have an integral garage at ground floor level. The proposed dwelling would be positioned 11.7 metres back from the public highway. I'll see if I can get a better one on that, actually.
Can't see that.
Members may have to refer to the plans in front of them, I think.
But the proposed dwelling would be positioned 11.7 metres back from the public highway, a little over 1.5 metres from either side boundary, and over 38 metres from the rear boundary of the site. It would project 0.3 metres beyond the adjacent property number 55, which is which is here. But it would be set back in line with the building line with number 59, as I've just mentioned. It is clear as well from the previous plan, if you can look at your plans pack, that the proposed house does comply with the 45-degree rule in relation to both neighbouring properties. The dwelling would measure a depth of 15.5 metres, a width of 15 metres and a height of 9.4, sloping down to 5.55 at the eaves. That's 0.2 metres higher than the existing house, which is not considered to be significant. It would be constructed with traditional red multi-stock facing brickwork, brown clay plain tiles and white painted timber frames, which are predominant in the area. The replacement building would decrease the gap that you would see between the properties at first floor level. I'm afraid you might be able to see just here on this very small drawing. But again, if you can refer to your plans pack, I think it's more clear. But the sloping roof on each side of the proposed dwelling is considered to be sufficient, and the separation distances between properties to retain a degree of spaciousness and mitigating the impact of the crown roof. There's a wide variety of properties in the Copsewood estate, and there are a number of properties in the wider, along Copsewood Way, which have been built relatively recently and now form part of the character of the area. The proposed house would have a distinct design, but it is considered that it would not appear out of keeping with the character of the area, given the varied nature of the properties in the street. Therefore, its design and impact on the visual amenity of the area is considered to be acceptable. This photograph, again, not particularly clear, but it shows the existing property on the site. Concern has been raised regarding loss of tree and hedging along this side. I can confirm that those will be retained. This is number 55 from the rear, and you can see the relationship with the existing property here. And also the next is the rear of number 59. From the front, this is how it looks from regarding number 59 and the relationship of the application property on your left, and from the front again in relation to number 55. I should also add that the parking arrangements would remain fairly similar to the existing arrangement with the access from the existing crossover. There would be adequate provision of off-street parking to the front of the new property, which is considered to be satisfactory. Having regard against all the relevant policies, the proposal is considered acceptable and recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a petition on this one. If you press the button when you're ready.
Good evening. I am the lead petitioner living at 53 Copswood Way, and I address you on behalf of the 56 names living on Copswood who signed against the proposed development. The design and access statement refers to this site as a brownfield site, which is a ridiculous statement to justify demolition and redevelopment in the Copswood area. The proposed dwelling would have a wide and rectangular front elevation with a substantial crown flat roof. The short height of pitched roof will be out of character with the steeply pitched surrounding roofs of the surrounding dwellings. The wide front elevation would look obstructive and out of scale in comparison to the front elevations of the adjoining dwellings. The present one-storey, four-bedroomed dwelling was substantially extended in 1999 and has a gross internal area of 2,687 square feet. The new house will increase to 5,162 square feet, an increase of 92%. The overall result is a very large visual mass. It is stated as a six-bedroom house, but the games area on the second floor is easily converted to further bedrooms. In essence, it could be an eight-bedroom house. We are seriously worried over the bringing forward of the present building line, setting a worrying precedent. Substantial parts of the proposed buildings have been moved in front of the existing building line by 1.74 metres. The building will not be stepped down the line of the slope as present, respecting the contour deal. We do not understand why planning supports this. Consequently, the plans will conflict with Part 1 Strategic Policies 2012, also with the policies BE1, 13, 15, 19, 20, 22, 20 and 38 of the Hillingdon Local Plan Part 2, and especially the Hillingdon Design and Accessibility Statement for residential layouts, which in combination requires that new development harmonises, complements or improves the character of an area and is designed to be appropriate to the identity and context of the landscape. I would now like to turn to the devastating effects this development will have on the life of the gentleman living at number 55 for over 35 years. His daughter is present tonight. May I please take you through the photographs and diagrams I gave you. Photograph number 1 shows you the current 13.9 feet separation between 55 and 57. This illustrates how, with a steep cat slide roof, light floods in between 55 and 57. This photograph was taken as the sun was setting in the west and illustrates how number 57 only casts a shadow very late in the evening. I will point out that the side wall is not parallel to the boundary as stated in the officer report. The distance will vary along that elevation with 5 feet, the maximum only at the very front elevation. Photograph number 2 shows the present rear of number 55 with the rear lounge windows. You can see how there will be serious effects on 55 and 59 due to the rearward extension of the proposed two-storey extension. Photograph number 3 shows the rear elevation bulk of the proposed house, especially the projecting two-storey rear extension. This will extend 24.6 feet beyond the rear wall of 55 and 22.3 feet beyond the rear wall of 59. There will be a further extension of the single story on both sides of a further 3.7 metres with a height of 3.6 metres, giving a total and acceptable mass from the rear windows of 59 and 55. No overshadowing diagrams need done. We pointed this out in early comments on the plans. It is possible that serious shadowing will take place on the rear French line windows of 55, further reducing the light to the lounge shadowing its patio and the garden for a substantial part of the day. Photograph number 4 shows perfectly how the present separation allows the daylight into 2 lounge windows and upper bedroom of number 55. Photograph number 5 footprint. A is a present offset corner. This transfers to B, where the new corner would be brought forward to 55. It will substantially reduce the light to these windows with a vertical brick wall coming within 4.92 feet, less with overhanging eaves. Photograph number 6 shows how the light enters the windows of 55 and the present separating distance. May I also point out the error on the officer's report on the 7.08, impact on neighbours. It states the hedge runs the width of the 2 houses, shielding the lounge windows from 55 from the development. You can see from number 6 it does not. Number 55, we will look at a vertical brick wall, and I repeat, only 4.9 feet away from these 3 windows. Number 7, the interior of the lounge of 55 shows you the light currently coming through the 2 flat windows.
We have reached time, I'm afraid.
Right.
Do members have any questions on either what's been said or on the photographs presented? All makes sense. Good. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Is there anyone here? I need the agent or the applicant first before I get a ward councillor, of course. Anyone here on behalf of the agent or the applicant? Nobody's moving. In that case, welcome to the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was just very briefly, based on the inconsistencies in the report of the officer that have been highlighted by Mr. Cave, I would request that you have a site visit along with the one in Pin Way that you've already agreed tonight. I think on the Cotswold estate there's been a massive amount of development. Since I've been a councillor for 18 years, it's been literally ripped asunder, all for reasons we know we've tried to fight, some we've stopped, some we haven't. All good planning reports, not criticising officers, but I think actually being on site and looking at what this house will do, 5,000 square metres plus, is a ginormous, massive house, and breaking the building line is something which has been maintained and defended throughout all of the years I was on planning and all of the years I've been on the council. So I really think it would be beneficial for you to see it. I don't want to keep sending you places all over the borough, but I don't think you can see it on a piece of paper. However good the report is, I really don't think it does justice to the actual impact on the ground, so I would request a site visit. Thank you.
I'm going to take this one back to officers for a moment or two. Could we just take that microphone off?
That's all right.
Can I pick up overshadowing, because I certainly had that in my early notes. Have we got any overshadowing evidence on this one, because it's substantial? Is that because it's in the wrong place and doesn't overshadow, or just we haven't got any?
No, I think the reason why we don't have any is because if you look at Mr. Cave's actually useful plan, it shows that the opening on the rear elevation of number 55, it takes a 45-degree line from the centre of that window, which is nearest to the development, and it would comply with that general rule. So usually in this sort of case where we have a habitable room window which has a primary window that does comply with policy, we usually wouldn't seek further evidence to demonstrate that actually the impact on its amenity was detrimental.
I'm just looking, because this does go substantially back, doesn't it, on one side. I'm just looking at the sort of overall bulk of it, and will it overshadow that garden? We often end up requesting. It does go quite a bit back beyond them, so it'd be interesting to understand the impact. I accept the 45-degree argument, but overshadowing covers more than that, doesn't it? It covers the impact on gardens to a degree. Higgins, as Councillor Higgins already had a slight go at this one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Unlike the last application, I think this one really is bulk. And I do have some concerns about this. I'd recommend a site visit, Chairman. Let's go and have a look at it, and I think we'd get a better idea. We've already done that recently, and that gave us quite a good insight to what we're dealing with. I would recommend a site visit.
Okay. The only issue with bulk on the Cotswold, of course, is that some of the plots, as we have seen in previous site visits, will take bulk, but that is a definite argument on this one. Councillor Higgins, sorry.
Yeah, although I understand Councillor Digby and Councillor Oswald, I'd actually go for refusal on this one. I think it's out of character. I think if you look at the drawing on the bottom of the plans, and that you can't really see them that well, it shows there's a dotted line of the existing building, and the whole part of that estate was how it was. Some buildings were vertical, but others were at an angle, so the light would come straight through, so it looked of a space. When you're putting two vertical buildings side by side, it's just too much bulk for the site, and it just takes away from all the character of that area. And I do think there's issues of the neighbours is showed on these photographs of that light will be lost as soon as that building is built.
I think the officers are going to come back in. I know the corollary to this is going to be what else has happened up on the Cotswold.
Yeah, I was just going to say the point that I think if members were considering any kind of street scene or visual design-related refusal reason, I'd be strongly steering them towards a site visit so they can take into account what else is in the street scene.
Where is this going in the building line, by the way? Is it forward of the existing building line? How marginal is marginal? Can we? Because those are relative words. I love those words, but I'm a numbers man.
The
So I prefer.
precise distances are
I know they are. I'm being a little uncharitable, but
It's 0.3 metres beyond number 55.
and on the other side.
On the other side, it's now been revised to be set back in line with the neighbouring property on that side.
I think we are heading towards adding a visit to our schedule up in Ryslip, but Councillor Castro, and then I'll take the sea of hands down this side in a moment.
Thank you, Chair. Just by hearing what we've just heard now, my colleague up there and John, of course, my main concern is the light, the window, the shadow, the way the building is shadowing. So I feel that the side visit would be really an ideal. I know it's been said, refuse, but I think before that...
Don't think we've enough on the table yet to go down. With what has happened with the rest of that estate, I think we need to see it to be certain what's going on.
You.
I also do want to see those overshadow diagrams because we need to know. Sorry, Richard, I won't bring you back in, but I had Councillor Morse held a moment or two ago. Sorry, my fault.
Just one point. The footprint of the building, the protester actually said that it was a very considerable one, and our report says it's a modest one. Could we get an answer to that simple point?
The petitioner was suggesting it's a massive increase in development, and the report says modest. I think I know where I might be, but I'll ask the officer to help me. In relation to the existing building, it's a fairly substantial increase, isn't it?
I think it's difficult because of the existing plot sizes, because obviously the plot is very large and the adjoining plots are very large as well, and some of the surrounding properties are very large. So bearing that in mind, it might not be disproportionate to the site. Coming back on the overshadowing point, actually, the Building Research Establishment guidance regarding impact from overshadowing talks about there being more than half of the garden overshadowed on the spring equinox, and given the size of the actual plots that these buildings are located within, it would be very, very difficult for it to actually have a detrimental impact on overshadowing of garden spaces because of the sheer size of the gardens.
Richard, I take your point, but we're having it anyway. I'd like to see them before we take this one further. I think there are two different points. I understand your point that this is a very substantial site, which may be able to take a substantial house. The council's question was in relation to the existing property and the new one, and I think we're all agreed it is significantly larger. The question that we've got to ask ourselves is, on this site, ultimately, in relation to other properties, can this take a house of this size in relation to the street scene and in relation to the site? Now that's a slightly different question, because we are aware that quite a number of properties have been changed in this road. Can I go down the table? Start with I'm going to work my way back up. So Councillor Flynn will go one quick go in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there are two real areas of concern here. One is the street scene, and two is the bulk massing point. And I think those two issues can only really adequately be dealt with by looking at the site. So I'm happy with that recommendation.
I think that's where we're going to go in a moment. Councillor Grant, do you have any? No, you're with that. Councillor Higgins.
Just two things. The shadowing is it's not so much the garden area that's been shadowed. It's actually a lack of light to the property next door.
That's the whole issue I want to...
I mean, that made that clear. The other thing is that I appreciate the site. Yes, it is a massive site. It can take large properties. But my concern is that you have to go with the principle of that is an area of special character, and we have to make sure that some of those fundamentals of the light coming through the properties Otherwise, every house down there will be demolished and it will end up looking like... I better not say anything more than that.
No. One more on this side,
Thank you very
and
much.
then I'm going to
Mr.
move
Chairman.
the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do have concerns concerning the bulk of this. We're losing the openness of the area as it looks, as it feels. You can walk along Cotswold Way and see through the houses, down the side, and the openness and the trees beyond. And with
Site visit will give us.
I think
give
the
us that
site visit
understanding.
will give us a big understanding.
It gives us an understanding of whether this works or not.
Especially in conjunction with the neighbouring properties and the overlooking, especially of number 59 and their side.
We will get a clear understanding of the relationship of properties on the site visit, as we always do, and I would always open it that if those on either side want to let us see it from their side, then that's absolutely fine by me. I think Councillor Oswald proposed a site visit. I seem to remember a while back. I have a seconder for it. All those in favour of deferral for a site visit clearly show. Thank you very much. And we will want overshadowing from the applicant, so and it would be good to have that done. Right, so that's 2 site visits so far. We don't get a third one because can't get a third one. You've done it. Well, that's right. You can't have a third one on this. Item 8 is 10 Jackets Lane, Northwood. This was a deferred application on the 12th of April. Members have now conducted a site visit. There is a further petition, so the petitioners have the right to address this again. The officer presentation will take into account the fact that members have already seen this and therefore are very familiar with what is being proposed. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll just focus on the revised changes since the previous committee. This is the revised plan. It shows the draft landscaping scheme. There's also an overshadowing assessment submitted with the application. Well, firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the house on plot 3, which is here. It's been extended slightly on the back from 2.46 metres to 2.55 metres. This is to ensure that the relationship between plot 4 and 3 comply with the SPD residential layouts in terms of not extending more than 4 metres from the rear elevation of plot 3. But the main change from the previous scheme brought forward to the committee was the resiting of the house on plot 4, which has been set back 1 metre in order to ensure that habitable room windows on the front are in excess of 21 metres from the rear openings of the neighbouring property at 4 Glennswood Place. The landscaping scheme also includes hedges along here. There's a landscape buffer. This would measure 3 metres in height. This photograph shows you this is approximately from plot 3 looking back towards number 4 Glennswood Place, and this is approximately the view you would get from that point. This photograph shows the development site from the neighbour, number 4 Glennswood Place. This is the indicative street scene, and this is plot 3 and 4, this is the building that's been set back 1 metre, and this is the view from number 4 Glennswood Place. So just to reiterate, the setback and the provision of the boundary buffer, along with the overshadowing assessment, are considered to show that there's no adverse impact to the amenity of occupiers at number 4 Glennswood Place. Similarly, the proposal is not considered to impact the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. As set out in the officer's report and at the previous committee, the development is not considered to impact the listed building located here or the green belt located here, and the development is not considered to impact the wider visual amenity of the area. Therefore, it's been recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. We have a further petition on this one. Mr. Ratcliffe, you know the format. You have already circulated some papers. Yeah, and they have, yeah. Members have seen those. If you press the button, it'll illuminate the microphone for me.
How can this scheme not be deemed an overdevelopment? The scheme was previously refused on the grounds of scale, design and the proposed dwellings resulting in a cramped, undesirable form of development, overlooking, loss of amenity and impact on this true country lane. The current application has only undergone ineffective minor scheme revision. Every new property is larger, of greater floor space and physically taller than all those properties that will remain in Jackets Lane and Hurst Place. With the applicant's adjacent scheme, this more than doubles the habitable space of the total remaining surrounding properties. This is clearly an overdevelopment, detrimentally changing the characteristics of the immediate vicinity from semi-rural to one of tightly packed estate. Why is the key garden development policy being ignored? The Council's policy DMH6, see Appendix 6, applies to both, quote, garden and backland development. As the policy title and text clearly differentiates between garden and backland, this is a garden development. The planning team have continually and unfairly chosen to ignore this important and very relevant policy in the neighbours' objections submitted in every iteration. This overdevelopment cannot be deemed in any way to be limited in scale, thus breaching DMH6 in all criteria. Does not protect the privacy of residential amenity of neighbouring homes. The impact of traffic, noise and light will be doubled. None of the houses are more intimate in scale. Many mature trees have already been cut down. All criteria breached. So what does the NPPF say about gardens? The first point of Section 7 main planning issues in the case officer's report states, the NPPF has a requirement to encourage the effective use of land by reusing land. The NPPF actually states, under its definition of reuse of previously developed land, excludes private residential gardens. This also is supported in the government's Annex 2 National Policy Framework definition, reuse of brownfield land. Quote, this excludes land such as private residential gardens. NPPF point 211, quote, for the purposes of decision making, the policies in the local plan should not be considered out of date simply because they were adopted prior to the NPPF publication. It's clear and unequivocal that the NPPF does not override the local plan DMH6, and in fact the NPPF itself supports the protection of gardens. The loss of amenity to 4 Glinswood Place, Appendix 2 please. The light blue line denotes the refused position of Plot 4. This was refused and still breaches BE21 bulk, scale and siting and BE24 overlooking. The applicant's proposed solution has moved this 30-foot high, 2,600 square foot, 5-bedroom house just over 1 metre away from the refused, and raised the roof height a further 1.4 metres. They have narrowed slightly the overlooking first floor window, however this does not change the midpoint in regard to overlooking distances or indeed the overlooking. In moving the proposed Plot 4 back less than the length of this table, the planning team have totally and unjustifiably deemed to drop BE24 overlooking policy from their list of relevant policies. This in spite of the overlooking still breaching the minimum 21 metre to private amenity and 24 metres window to patio doors, Appendix 6. The council policy states neighbouring residential amenity of existing homes must be maintained. The loss of all late social, afternoon and evening sunlight, coupled with the overlooking, has a hugely detrimental impact with loss of amenity to the key habitable rooms and patio of our house. The case officer's comment on the site visit was, it wouldn't bother me. The grandly titled landscape buffer zone is a total red herring. The proposed 3-metre high hedge immediately breaches the council's own 2-metre policy. This totally fails to screen the first floor overlooking window. It screens nothing. To summarise, this remains a clear overdevelopment and intensification of this tranquil semi-rural space. The scheme has not addressed the detrimental shadowing and parking issues to 4 and 5 Hurst Place. The planning department have failed unfairly the neighbours and petitioners to consider or apply the clearly relevant policies. Indeed, the NPPF itself factually recognises the protection of garden space. The application has simply toyed with minor ineffective changes to Plot 4 for change effect, failing completely to resolve any of the refused breaches to policy with proximity, overlooking and enforced loss of amenity to neighbouring homes. We request this application is refused and not returned to delegated authority.
Okay, thank you very much. Do members have any questions? Nope. No, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Hang on, I guess the councillor. Oh, is anyone? Is the agent or the applicant here? I thought they might be running out of people now.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Following on from the last committee meeting and subsequent site visit, I'd like to make the following points which I feel deal with the main key aspects that have been picked up. In respect to the amended application plans, the officer's report, and in addressing the neighbours' comments, I'd like to confirm, as per the points raised in section 7.08 of the officer's report, that the scheme before you tonight has been designed and laid out in accordance with the council's policies and the HDAS. Particular attention was given to the window-to-window distances, even though there is no direct habitable window-to-habitable window occurrences. In addition to this, details have been provided of a landscape buffer since the last committee, which will provide additional screening to the site and between the two properties. This has been done at a draft stage and can obviously be confirmed by condition. And finally, on overshadowing, an overshadowing report was provided, again following the last committee, and it was produced to accompany the application and confirmed that there would be no impact to the neighbouring property or very limited to the rear garden or its amenities in accordance with the BRE standards. I think before you and the officer's report and the work that's gone into it, it would be good if you could approve the application tonight. Thank you.
Members have any questions? No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. I'll try and be brief. I suppose people have to develop, and it's very important that the country moves forward and that people have homes, etc., etc. This isn't like a key worker development. This isn't for people that need homes. This is a massive, massive 30-metre slab of luxury development, which I'm not against, but I am against it here. And the shadowing report we talked about, which shows there's sunlight between 2 and 4 p.m., which is marvellous, but everyone's at work, aren't they? So, you know, and the comment, I think the kind of flippant comment that the sun's going down and therefore it'll be shadowed anyway in the officer's report, which just basically doesn't understand how people live their lives. So this garden can't be used at 4 o'clock because it'll be overshadowed. There are discrepancies in the meterage between windows. I'm not going to go into detail, but to quote the president of the RIBA, it's ridiculous and doesn't stand up. Looking at our officer's recommendation, the officer on site quoted that there must be a typo, that the plans have been drawn with a typo, and no one's addressed any of that. I think it's a catalogue of errors. I'm quite embarrassed that our council's doing this to a resident, and that we can't stop this happening. I think enough is enough. This clearly is out of character, out of place, it's overdense, it's a huge, huge development on that plot. It really does dwarf anything near it, 30 metres high, and it's been moved a tad to one side, and they're going to put a big hedge in. It's like, well, lovely, that doesn't really overcome the fact it shouldn't be there. I would ask you to refuse it, and let's have our day in court and try and see what happens on the appeal.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to pick off some of the bits of this with officers, and then I think we'll get to the key of this one in a moment. James, would you comment on garden policy for me? Garden grab, garden brownfield.
I think without going into the details of complexities of garden grab policy, one of the points I'd say is you've got 2 units to the north of plots 3 and 4 recently allowed at appeal. You've got Glinswood Place itself that is about 12 years old. The characteristics of this site are such that this is the one bit of land left, and I don't think for 1 minute a planning inspector is going to have concerns about garden grabbing policy. In my mind, this is all about the impact on number 4 and whether that is acceptable or not. I think that really is the key matter before you as a planning committee for this application.
Can we get this distances thing bottomed out? Are we absolutely happy that this now fully complies? There are no typos, errors, plan errors?
Yeah.
James?
So there's 2 points here. Is the 21 metres met? And is 21 metres plus an additional 3 metres to do with the rear patio met? So the 21 metres is met. Where there's this issue about what officers have and haven't been saying, if I can give a clear steer on this, we try and apply as rigidly as possible the 21 metre rule. That's a kind of national thing, window to window. Inspectors recognise it. Pretty much every local planning authority I'm aware of uses that. The additional 3 metre patio distance is something that was originally put in the Hillingdon Design Accessibility Statement. It's not something we win appeals on, and it's something that we don't tend to rigidly apply as officers, that additional 3 metre patio thing that's referenced in the HDAS. So I don't condone any flippant comments from officers, that the way it should have been explained is that we apply 21 metres, but the council does not tend to apply the additional 3 metre patio point, because it's out of sync with the whole suite of sort of national guidance of the way inspectors interpret overlooking distances. So I think, so to clarify, the 21 metres is complied with through the revised plans.
Right, let's, if I can steer this very slightly, we've all seen this on site, or many of us have. This is a very substantial property which will be at the end, effectively to the left, but the end of the garden of Ford Lindswood. That's where it is. Let's be absolutely clear. It is also by the designer, a taller property than average houses or the other houses that surround it. Those were the two things we gained on site. I'm not putting a view forward, I'm just putting two factual statements forward. The issue for you to consider as the Head of Planning rightly drew your attention to, I think in relation to the 3 of the plots, I don't think there's any issues that are going to stand up particularly well on appeal. The parking is, there is sufficient parking on the sites. The garden element is, we do lose appeals on this because this is a bit that is clearly left, and it isn't grabbing the back of somebody's garden or the rear access to somebody's garden. And we have lost appeals very close to this. The size and bulk is where I would like you to start, because I think that's where this rises or falls. Is size and bulk, particularly in relation to Lindswood Place.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'm not trying to put officers on the spot, but I do sort of question, if we do have a policy, then why don't we use it? I'm a bit baffled because our slogan is putting residents first, and obviously we're putting residents first by saying that if there's an extra 3 metres patio because we value our residents having their amenity, and then we're saying, well, we have it, but we're not going to use it. I don't quite understand. That's the first point.
Maybe one for forums elsewhere, but we'll see what the Head of Planning says about it.
Yeah, obviously it is a backland development. I tend to, but I'm also realistic, and is one property too much for the site? I think that's the first thing, and I also think that these are just too grandioso for that particular area, and I'll leave it at that, I think.
Okay. I'll ask the Head of Planning to come back, and then I'll go down to Councillor Duke.
This issue of the 21 metres, it does relate to overlooking. I wouldn't be too wedded completely in terms of the overall residential amenity with the 21 metres. So you could have a development that is 22, 23 or 24 metres away, but you as a committee feel that the sheer size and bulk and the relationship is such that you're not happy with the development proposal. So it is 21 metres is normally an overlooking distance. So it really does boil down to sort of a subjective opinion of members, and members have been to the site, so you're completely in a strong position to come to a subjective view. It really does boil down to, in my opinion, are you happy with the relationship of the proposed dwelling and its impact on number 4? But I wouldn't be too wedded on the 21 metres in terms of.
I'm going to just hold that, because I think that's been we've gone far enough down that particular avenue for tonight. Councillor Duke.
I guess I'll hark back to what I was doing just before I came here today. I was making my family tuna pasta, and part of the recipe is add one lemon. Yeah, bear with me. But specifically, my wife likes me adding a whole lemon's juice. I only add half a lemon, and I really had to squeeze that thing as hard as possible to get every last drop out of it. And that is what's happening here. So, if it were, thank you. I'm not just showing off about my cooking skills, but so the fact is that there are 4 plots here. If this was 3 plots on this territory, this would have been passed last time. And clearly the issue is this last one that they've squeezed on. It just about technically works, but I think we are definitely into this area of thinking about impact on number 4, thinking about overall bulk and scale and size of this development, and it's to me it's just one too many.
Councillor Oswald, you held as next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm glad that we had the site visit because it gave us a good idea of the relationship between the properties, or the proposed properties rather, and number 4. And we did get a good look at that because we were allowed through into the back garden, which gave us quite a good, it gave me quite a good idea of what was there. Yes, this may well be tight, this whole development, but the point is, it's in policy, and it says in the report, planning policies and standards, UDP/LDF designation and London plan, and all the policies are laid out, and it's within policy. I don't think I would want to refuse this, Chairman, because I think that we would lose this out appeal. It's within policy. What does the planning inspector do? He looks at the report, doesn't he? And he sees that it's recommended for approval. So, yes, I know he does. So I think it's difficult here. I think we need to be very, very careful what we do. Chairman, thank you for bringing me in. I'm going to move the officer's recommendation because that's what the report says, and it's within policy. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just hold for 2 seconds. Do I have any other views about to come to the table? And then I'm going to ask to see if there is a seconder for that, and then we'll see where that goes. Councillor Graham, you were the first hand I saw, and then I'll take Councillor Moore.
Happy with this, and I think it's an overdevelopment of this semi-rural area. There are already 2 additional properties, large houses, which have been approved, which will stand behind the protected property number 12. It's all having a negative impact on the rural character of Jackets Lane. As was said, I think it's a plot too many. Plot 4, I think, is too tight. Its closeness and everything else to Hurst Place, and especially number 4, Glenwood Place. And I actually will vote against this recommendation. Well,
I need to see whether it gets seconded to start with, because I'm not sure that's going to happen in a minute. Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Morse.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I
was also one of the lucky ones to visit the site.
You were?
And yes, it is an overdevelopment. No, not on the motorbike. But no, it's this. The argument here is we either have to agree to everything or it's kicked out. Now, 3 of the plots are fine. It's that 4th plot that we're arguing over. And it's a shame that we can't turn around and say, go away, work on the 4th plot and pass.
You know what the rules are as well as I know them.
It was disappointing is that, yes, the property was moved back, but at the same time, it went up. So it's almost as if, well, okay, I'm going to let you have an extra couple of metres, but I'm going to go up a couple of extra metres to compensate. The way I feel at the moment, I feel like going against the officer's recommendations.
This one in a moment. Councillor Morse, which way are you going? Are you going to declare your hand for me?
Because this is difficult, I'm going to have to give my opinion. As a person who actually, the house gentleman living in number 4 is, I actually had to approve that when it was completely open green land. So what we've got scenario is we have development and then we have further green land which is available for use as housing. And while I reluctantly accept the point that they've gone for maximum profit, I'm of the view that appeal this could be won, and I'm reluctantly saying I think I will have to vote in the support of officers.
Are you seconding Councillor Oswald? Are you going to second Councillor Oswald's proposal? Okay. Let's test that one now, because I think you put it forward. I think I know where it might go in a moment. Okay. We have a proposal duly seconded that we accept officers' recommendations. I do remind committee, as I will always on these occasions, that if that doesn't go through, we will then have to come back and come up with something, because if you are to refuse this, you have to explain clearly why you have done so, and the legal officer on my left will have to nod appropriately. Otherwise I'm in trouble. Okay. All those in favour of accepting officer recommendations as proposed, please clearly show. I have 3. All those against, please clearly show. Oh, well, that gives me one side of this debate. Okay. You're on your own now, guys. Yeah. I think we were focusing somewhere around a bulk of this property, which would lead me towards BE21 quite appropriately, and maybe the head of planning might help me a little here.
So policy BE21 and the safe policies UDP says planning permission will not be granted for new buildings or extensions which by reason of their siting bulk and proximity would result in a significant loss of residential amenity. I'm sensing that one seems to be the one that members have an issue with. So I'd clarify that there is a separate policy to do with daylight and sunlight, but I don't feel comfortable with that because they have done overshadowing, and equally I don't feel comfortable with the overlooking. So reason.
Councillor Higgins,
would
that help you?
B21.
That helps. That's very good. That's very kind. But I also think we should actually DMH6 is an important reason for refusal as well. I know that officers probably say that he won't stand up, but I still think it's got a 50-50 on it.
Are we on the 20? Are we
no, it's just backland. It's just backland development.
Right,
garden
hang on. I've got the legal officer screaming in my ear hole here. Go, come on. Is this the second time tonight?
Chairman, unfortunately, this isn't backland. We would lose on that refusal ground. I understand your point fully. No, I think this isn't where. I think it was made quite clear in the officer's report. It's not backland. We don't have that option. This is the last bit of an area that's been developed, and it would just be so difficult. And I'd rather go in with a really good, strong refusal reason, which the head of planning has guided towards, and I would support that.
Are there any alternatives on that at the moment? 'Cause I'll move that forward in a moment. If yeah.
I just want something else. It's our policy.
I think the head of planning is indicating he's not comfortable.
Because that's 3 meters. You said it's 21 plus 3 meters for patio.
There are large numbers of paragraphs in both our HDAS residential areas and residential extensions that we we do apply across the board. The 15 metres for distance between properties with 21, but there are 1 or 2 bits of small print that we found over the years that we just cannot win appeals on them. And so what you'll find is in the new Part 2 local plan, all the bits that work for us are in the Part 2 local plan, and there are 1 or 2 bits, and one of them has been brought up tonight, that are not in the prescriptive policies that carry forward the HDAS in the Part 2 local plan. And
one size bulk.
So, just to clarify, the reason I reference B21 is that it does mention siting bulk, proximity, so it would seem to capture all the issues that you're raising. So all I'm saying is that I'm personally taking out overlooking and a technical daylight and sunlight issue, because I don't think if we try to start arguing BRE things that we're going to be able to sustain it as appeal.
I have general. You have. Issues. Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Flynn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would seem to me to be better to present one very strong reason for refusal to the planning inspectorate than a whole number of fairly
Well, I think that's what the head of
trivial.
planning is guiding.
So I mean, in terms of what the head of planning has said, it's pretty clear to me that the reason we've rejected this as a committee is because of the relationship between 4 Glyndon Place and plot 4 specifically. And I think the reason that the head of planning gave there actually does sort of give a good sort of overview of that sort of relationship, which does seem to be inadequate in this situation, and is the reason why we've, as a committee, rejected this application. So I would hope that would get the priority.
Well, I think that's our strongest suit. I think the others would weaken it, and the inspectorate, sometimes if you chuck too much at it, you tend to lose the whole thing. Councillor Jacob, last point, because I think we need
Well, less a
there.
point, but I'm going to stick my neck out like my colleague Councillor Oswald and basically raise to refuse on the grounds of the E21, and sort of put that out there and see if I'm going to get it second.
Well, I'm glad you've done that, because I was going to... I think the legal officer has come through. We've made out a case. Good. Thank you for that. I've proposed... I think I have a second... Councillor Higgins got his hand up. Are we happy to delegate the head of planning to agree the wording on this one?
Yes.
Yeah, James.
Sorry, James.
You got the wording. Saves me a job. Right, all those in favour of refusal, please clearly show. I get 5. All those against refusal, 3. Well, 5-3. That one's refused. Right, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to item 9, 186 Field End Road, Eastcote Pinner. And these do...
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks the demolition of the existing building to erect a 4-storey building comprising an office at ground floor level and 3 two-bedroom flats above. The site is located on the western side of Field End Road, just north of its junction with Elm Avenue. The site is in Eastcote Town Centre and is within a secondary shopping area and is adjacent to Eastcote Conservation Area, shown on the image in gold here. And also there's a locally listed building, Champers Wine Bar, located immediately to the north of the site. Currently on the site you have a modest-sized commercial premises with 2 stories, as shown on this plan. The proposal will be much larger, extending significantly to the rear and occupying almost the entire site. At first floor level, it doesn't extend so far, but it does extend 3 metres beyond the neighbouring property at 188. The layout is repeated at second and third floor levels, except for a slight setback from the front here on the top floor. Although not shown on the plans, there is a window on the neighbouring building just here, which is impacted by the development because it extends beyond the 45-degree line in relation to it. Therefore, the proposal is considered to harm the amenity of occupiers therein by virtue of loss of light, outlook, and a detrimental sense of enclosure. This plan shows the existing building. The Council's Conservation Officer has stated that the principle of demolishing the existing building, which stands as a small reminder of the character of Eastcote and Field End Road prior to Metroland development, and maintains a significant gap between the locally listed building here and the 1920 shopping parade on the corner, would not be acceptable. The Conservation Officer has also raised concern regarding the bulk and design, roof form and footprint of the proposed building, which is considered inappropriate and harmful to the adjacent conservation area, which is just, the boundary just runs right along there, and the nearby locally listed building. As is clear from this photograph, the proposal does try to emulate the building next door. However, these buildings have always remained independent of one another and the surrounding built form, which is considered important to retain. Despite the similarities, the proposed windows and dormers are not in proportion or in line with the adjacent property. You can see these ones are slightly larger than these, and also the sills on the windows are actually lower than the windows on the adjacent property. The building's footprint and depth is much larger and bulkier. As mentioned, the building abuts the boundary of the conservation area and a locally listed building. Its positioning is more prominent when viewed from the conservation area, and its scale would be considered to dominate the adjacent locally listed building. On balance, the proposed development would be considered to harm the character and appearance of the street, adversely affecting the setting of the East Coast Conservation Area and adjacent locally listed building and residential amenity of neighbouring occupiers. Therefore, it's been recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
The Head of Planning would like to add a quick comment.
I don't think this is an on-balance.
I think the Head of Planning has steered you. I've got hands all over the place. Councillor Higgins, I saw first, and then Councillor Morgan.
I'll go with officer's recommendation on this.
I was going to second you.
Does anybody have any alternative views on this one? No, right. As in you want to approve it?
No, I just find it strange. It's next to a 4-storey property, and it's separated from the conserved Champneys. So I don't see why it is that we're taking such a strong line and turning it down. Is there? Am I missing something?
Yeah. Although the front elevation's the same mass, once you go back, it's much larger. So this side elevation's considerably larger, and so what you can't see is there's a much smaller side elevation being obscured.
Good. All those in favour of refusal, please clearly show. That one's unanimously refused. Thank you. Item 10. The Bear on the Barge, Public House, Moorhall Road, wants to retain a couple of single-storey structures. You've got some pictures to help you with this one, have you, Richard?
Yes, Chairman. This is seeking retrospective consent for erection of 2 single-storey extensions, one to the side, one to the rear. I'll skip to the photographs. So the photograph on the left shows the rear extension. The photograph on the right shows the side. Here again, on the right is the rear extension, and this is an existing outbuilding already within the site. These photographs are both taken from the east of the site. I think the photograph on the left shows the scale of the extensions and additions that have occurred to the building since over time, actually. The development is considered to disproportionately increase the footprint of the original building, detracting from its originally modest proportions. The scale of the additions, coupled with their incongruous design and finish, results in a development that is detrimental to the visual appearance of the site and open aspect and visual amenity of the greenbelt. Given their design, siting, scale and mass, they are considered to represent an incongruous development, harmful to the heritage value of the Whitewater Loch Conservation Area and visual amenity of the greenbelt. Therefore, the application has been recommended for refusal.
Councillor Moore, first on this one.
I'll go with officer's recommendations.
Really? That one's refused. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, 9 Harville Road. There's a minor bit in the addendum on this one. I think it removes one word from the report. An important word. Not. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So, this application is seeking the erection of a 2-storey detached building with habitable roof space to create 6 self-contained flats. This site is a large rectangular corner plot located at the junction of Harville Road and Highfield Drive. There is currently a bungalow on the site positioned behind the main building line of the street here. There is greenbelt to the east and a blanket TPO on the site. However, there is no protected trees affected by the proposal. These plans show the footprint of the development and its positioning within the site. The replacement building has been moved forward in line with the other properties in the row, but it would now project 2 metres beyond the neighbouring property number 10, Harville Road. This plan also shows that it would measure 17 metres wide and a maximum depth of 26 metres, with the single-storey part, which has got the terrace here, measuring 9.1 metres in depth alone. I'd also like to draw your attention to the roof terrace here, which is shared by both the flats here and here. This is considered to raise concern regarding overlooking potential disturbances and security concerns between each users. I think it's also important to note that the first floor plan fails to provide the roof detail of some of the single-storey rear extensions. So although the two-storey projection here complies with the 45 degree with this neighbour, the single-storey element is not shown on this plan, which on the next elevation is shown here and here, and that does not comply with the 45 degree line. The bottom image also, I think, is very telling in this development, where we see the silhouette of the existing neighbour within the proposed development. The building would measure a maximum height of 8.8 metres in height and would have a large crown roof. Overall, the proposal is considered to be very excessive in scale and bulk, and as a result would appear dominant and incongruous in the street scene. This is the view here you would get from the side at the junction with Highfield Road. In relation to the north, the proposal extends 4 metres at first floor level and 6.8 metres at ground floor level. It is noted that the positioning of the existing property does impact actually the existing rear openings on this neighbour, but it does benefit from having side windows which overlook the front garden. Whereas if I just flick back to the previous plan, the new development would actually totally enclose those windows and also impact the rear openings because of the depth of it within the site. So the proposed development would significantly affect these openings and would harm the residential amenity of occupiers within that property. The site is also located in flood zone 1 and is proposing quite a large basement. The council's water management officer has stated that given the scale of the basement and its proximity to the side boundaries, there is a risk of the applicant not being able to provide an acceptable scheme without altering the layout of the development. Therefore, this should constitute a refusal reason. For the reasons as explained and set out in the officer's report, the proposal is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Before we go into this one, the head of planning is not totally comfortable with the wording of refusal reason 4, and if we do go with refusal, we'll be looking for delegated approval.
Yes, it would just be to actually strengthen the refusal reason 4 and to reflect the fact that the reason it's a refusal reason on this application is the sheer scale of the basement, which is absolutely massive, and to expand on that, because if it was a smaller basement, we would just be having a planning condition probably. It's because it's absolutely huge in proportion to the site. So what I'd want to do is to make it absolutely clear why we're refusing the basement. And it will probably be a much larger, more detailed refusal reason.
I'm sure
like delegated authority.
If members go with the refusal on this one, I'm sure they'll give you delegated authority to amend the wording of that. Right, I've got hands all over the place. Let's go down the table just to be fair. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as the head of planning has said, you just read the report, it sounds like the size and the scale of this basement have raised a number of concerns of officers, and there are concerns about policy as well. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a bit of a no-brainer, and I'd certainly support the officer's recommendation on this.
Go on, Councillor Catter. There was a bit of a race on this one to work out who got up.
Thank you. Actually, it's very interesting, and I really like the last statement which is made, that when you are refusing it, and the number of points should be made stronger to start with, so that makes the case stronger. Therefore, I am going to second the refusal.
Good. So we propose the second. Before you all sort of career off. Richard, will you explain this telecom mast?
Thank you, Chairman. This is for the replacement of an existing 20-metre high telecoms mast with a 27.5 metre high mast and associated cabinet and apparatus to allow for site sharing with 4 separate telecoms providers, which potentially avoids the addition of further masts in the area. This, combined with it being an upgrade to existing apparatus and the lack of availability of alternative sites to house the other operators, is considered very special circumstances to justify the development in the Greenbelt. The replacement mast would be positioned just immediately to the north of the existing location of the mast. The existing mast is shown on this plan, and the proposed is 7.5 metres higher. The mast has been designed and located to minimise the visual impact on the surroundings and will be largely screened from public areas and is a significant distance from any major residential areas. There are also a number of trees around the site which can be seen on this aerial and also seen in the following photograph. It isn't significantly larger, and the existing mast does make better use of the site because more operators will be sharing it. On balance, it's not considered to impact the countryside conservation area or the openness of the Greenbelt. Therefore, the application has been recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Oswald. Councillor Casser, you were just second on that one, so you can second that one.
Not quick enough.
I know, it's okay. All those in favour, please clearly show. That's 7, 8, 9. That's everybody, I think. That's unanimous. Right, that brings North Planning to a close at 8:25. Thank you very much. Can I just say, before we close, he's been keeping it quite quiet, but this is Charles Francis' last meeting clerking us, as he's leaving the authority in a week or so. My personal thanks for his skills, dedication and calmness over many years doing North Planning. So thank you very much indeed, and good luck.
Thank you very much.